Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Depending on where you are in this world, God bless you. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. Today we're continuing in the book of Jasher, and we are in the chapter 77. And I'm going to read chapters 77 and 78 today. Now, something you're going to notice here in this chapter. Jethro is the man who took Joseph's staff and left from before Pharaoh when he suggested that Pharaoh not go against the children of Israel but send them away. But Balaam wanted to, we know who Balaam is. He's the devil. And so now we're in chapter 77, and they refer to Jethro as Ruel. So I don't know how that came how this happened. So, Dr. Joey, did you notice anything that I'm missing? How his name was changed from Jethro to Ruel? Okay, well, we can talk about this, but I was reading this and I was like, wait a minute. His father-in-law's name is Jethro, and that's how he got the stick, the stick from Moses, that Moses wound up with. But anyway, chapter 77. Sometimes when you're reading something and you're following along and everything's going good and you're like keeping pace and you're keeping up and everything is dawning on you and all the connections, and then all of a sudden, huh? What? No. Well, I had one of those moments, so I stopped the video and I'm like, I have to start this over. I have to go see what happened here. But I can't find anywhere that it references the change of his name. So Dr. Joey or Lisa or Jennifer or Jacqueline, anybody out there can fill me in. I would certainly appreciate it. And now we're in chapter 77. I'm going to read 77 and 78. Adakim was 20 years old when he reigned over Egypt. He reigned 4 years. In the 206th year of Israel's going down to Egypt did Adakim reign over Egypt. But he continued not so long in his reign over Egypt as his fathers had continued their reigns. For Milol, his father, had reigned 94 years in Egypt, but he was 10 years sick and died, for he had been wicked before the Lord. And all the Egyptians called his name Adakim Pharaoh, like the name of his fathers, as was their custom to do in Egypt. And all the wise men of Pharaoh called the name of Adakim Ahuz, for short is called Ahuz in the Egyptian language, because he was short in stature, wasn't very tall. And Adakim was exceedingly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, so he was short and fat, and ugly, and he had a great beard which reached to the soles of his feet. I've never heard any kind of description like that, a physical description, so clear. This chapter's just weird. Okay, keep going. Verse 7. And Pharaoh sat upon his father's throne to reign over Egypt, and he conducted the government of Egypt in his wisdom. And while he reigned, he exceeded his father and all the preceding kings in wickedness. And he increased his yoke over the children of Israel. And he went with his servants to Goshen, to the children of Israel. And he strengthened the labor over them, and he said unto them, Complete your work, each day's task, and let not your hands slacken from our work from this day forward, as you did in the days of my father. And he placed officers over them from among the children of Israel, and over these officers he placed taskmasters from among his servants. And he placed over them a measure of bricks for them to do according to that number, day by day, And he turned back and went to Egypt. At that time the taskmasters of Pharaoh ordered the officers of the children of Israel, according to the command of Pharaoh, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, do your work each day and finish your task, and observe the daily measure of bricks. Diminish not anything. And it will come to pass that if you are deficient in your daily bricks, I will put your young children in their stead. Meaning he's going to put the kids or the babies in place of where the bricks are missing. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so in those days, as Pharaoh had ordered them. And whenever any deficiency was found in the children of Israel's measure of their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the wives of the children of Israel and take infants of the children of Israel to the number of bricks deficient. And they would take them by force from their mothers' laps and put them in the building instead of the bricks. And while their fathers and mothers were crying over them and weeping when they heard the weeping voices of their infants in the wall of the building, and the taskmasters prevailed over Israel, that the Israelites should place their children in the building, so that a man placed his son in the wall and put mortar over him, while his eyes wept over him, and his tears ran down upon his child. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so to the babes of Israel for many days, and no one pitied or had compassion over the babes of the children of Israel. And the number of all the children killed in the building was 270, some whom they had built upon instead of the bricks, which had been left deficient by their fathers, and some whom they had drawn out dead from the building. And the labor imposed upon the children of Israel in the days of Abijam exceeded in hardship that which they had performed in the days of his father. And the children of Israel sighed every day on account of their heavy work, for they had said to themselves, Behold, when Pharaoh will die, his son will rise up and lighten our work. But they increased the latter work more than the former. And the children of Israel sighed at this, and their cry ascended to God on account of their labor. And God heard the voice of the children of Israel and their cry in those days, and God remembered his covenant with them which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God saw the burden of the children of Israel and their heavy work in those days, and he determined to deliver them. And Moses the son of Amram was still confined in the dungeon in those days, in the house of Reuel the Midianite. And Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, did support him with food secretly day by day. And Moses was confined in the dungeon in the house of Reuel for 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, which was the first year of the reign of Pharaoh over Egypt, in the place of his father, Zipporah said to her father Reuel, No person inquires or seeks after the Hebrew man, whom ye did bind in the prison now 10 years. Now therefore, if it seems good in your sight, let him send and see whether he is living or dead. But her father knew not that she had supported him. And Reuel her father answered and said to her, Has ever such a thing happened that a man should be shut up in a prison without food for 10 years, and that he should live? And Zipporah answered her father, saying, Surely you have heard that the God of the Hebrews is great and awful, and does wonders for them at all times. He it is who delivered Abraham from Ur of the Chaldeans, and Isaac from the sword of his father, and Jacob from the angel of the Lord who wrestled with him at the ford of Jabbok. Also with this man has he done many things. He delivered him from the river in Egypt, and from the sword of Pharaoh, and from the children of Cush. So also can he deliver him from famine and make him live. And the thing seemed good in the sight of Reuel, and he did according to the word of his daughter. And he sent to the dungeon to ascertain what became of Moses. And he saw, and behold, the man Moses was living in the dungeon, standing upon his feet, praising and praying to the God of his ancestors. And Ruel commanded Moses to be brought out of the dungeon. So they shaved him, and he changed his prison garments and ate bread. And afterward Moses went into the garden of Ruel, which was behind the house, and he there prayed to the Lord his God, who had done mighty wonders for him. And it was that while he prayed, he looked opposite to him, and behold, a sapphire stick was placed in the ground, which was planted in the midst of the garden. And he approached the stick, and he looked, and behold, the name of the Lord God of hosts was engraved thereon, written and developed upon the stick. And he read it, and stretched out his hand, and he plucked it like a forest tree from the thicket, and the stick was in his hand. And this is the stick with which all the works of our God were performed, after he had created heaven and earth, and all the host of them, seas, rivers, and all their fishes. And when God had driven Adam from the Garden of Eden, he took the stick in his hand, and went and tilled the ground from which he was taken. And the stick came down to Noah, and was given to Shem and his descendants, until it came into the hand of Abraham the Hebrew. And when Abraham had given all he had to his son Isaac, he also gave to him this stick. And when Jacob had fled to Padan Aram, he took it into his hand, and when he returned to his father, he had not left it behind him. Also, when he went down to Egypt, he took it into his hand, and gave it to Joseph, one portion above his brethren. For Jacob had taken it by force from his brother Esau. And after the death of Joseph, the nobles of Egypt came into the house of Joseph, and the stick came into the hand of Ruel the Midianite. And when he went out of Egypt, he took it in his hand and planted it in his garden. And all the mighty men of the Kenites tried to pluck it when they endeavored to get Zipporah his daughter, but they were unsuccessful. So that stick remained planted in the garden of Ruel until he came who had a right to it, and took it. And when Ruel saw the stick in the hand of Moses, he wondered at it, and he gave him his daughter Zipporah for a wife. Chapter 78. At that time died Baal Chanan, son of Ekbor, king of Edom, and was buried in his house in the land of Edom. And after his death, the children of Esau went to the land of Edom, and took from there a man who was in Edom, whose name was Hadad, and they made him king over them to rule in the place of Baal Chanan, their king. And Hadad reigned over the children of Edom 48 years. And when he reigned, he resolved to fight against the children of Moab, to bring them under the power of the children of Esau, as they were before. But he was not able, because the children of Moab heard this thing, and they rose up and hasted to elect a king over them from among their brethren. And they afterward gathered together a great people, and sent to the children of Ammon, their brethren, for help to fight against Hadad, king of Edom. And Hadad heard the thing which the children of Moab had done, and was greatly afraid of them, and refrained from fighting against them. In those days Moses, the son of Amram, in Midian, took Zipporah, the daughter of Ruel the Midianite, for a wife. And Zipporah walked in the ways of the daughters of Jacob. She was nothing short of righteousness of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. And Zipporah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Gershon, for he said, "And I was a stranger in a foreign land." But he circumcised not his foreskin at the command of Ruel his father-in-law. And she conceived again and bore a son, but circumcised his foreskin, and called his name Eliezer. For Moses said, "Because the God of my fathers was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh." And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, greatly increased the labor of the children of Israel in those days, and continued to make his yoke heavier upon the children of Israel. Excuse me. And he ordered a proclamation to be made in Egypt, saying, "Give no more straw to the children or to the people to make bricks with. Let them go and gather themselves straw as they could find it. Also the tale of the bricks which they will make, let them give each day, and diminish nothing from them, for they are idle in their work." And the children of Israel heard this, and they mourned and sighed, and they cried unto the Lord on account of the bitterness of their souls. And the Lord heard the cries of the children of Israel, and saw the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. And the Lord was jealous of his people and his inheritance, and heard their voice. And he resolved to take them out of the affliction of Egypt, to give them the land of Canaan for a possession. You know, the Lord is long-suffering, but when you have ticked him off and made him angry, and he punishes, depending on how bad your sin was, or your country's sins, will depend on how long the country or you are punished. Well, here in the Old Testament stories. But we know, because the Lord is long-suffering, he has mercy on us. He deals with us. He puts up with us. But that's going to come to an end. And all the wickedness in this world is going to be wiped away and will not exist ever again. And all of his children that love him and he loves, he's going to take us all to a beautiful, wonderful place. And we can be with him who's loved us so much. We can be with him forever. And as always, you know I'm a big crybaby, but I still love you.